Hello, welcome to our paper on GDPR challenges. My name is Mirosław Kutyłowski, and I would like to welcome you in name of my co-authors, Lauks-Dutka and Moti. So our topic is GDPR. What is the GDPR? It is one of the key elements of information protection today, focusing on personal data. It provides some very strict legal requirements by means of continental law in Europe. And the goal is to control over processing personal data. And the ultimate goal is to restrict misuse of personal data. It formulates some paradigms like privacy by design and revocable consent to process data and so on. It is in force since May 2018, effectively. And we have 2 years experience with GDPR. Why is it so important? It's not only European, because it concerns also all activities around the world when considering offering goods and services inside Europe, regardless of the region. So the model in GDPR, implicit model, is that data has some structure. Is the contents of the data, traditional contents. Then we have some legal basis to process this data, and we have a data subject for this data. Given all these 3 components, there is a simple way of testing legality of data by looking if the data subject matches the consent given, and if the processing it matches the legal basis given in this data. Then we can process the data on the left hand, on the right hand side. So of course, the data is not written this way in IT system. There is some explicit contents, and we have to derive the missing 2 parts, like legal basis and the data subject. And it is implicitly assumed that this process is simple and can be done automatically or in a semi-automatic way. Okay, so in the following pages, I will point you to some challenges, some logic problems in not only interpretation, but coming from the requirements to technical reality. Well, to start with something concrete, let us think about the data that concerns not one single person, but 2 persons, person A and person B. So we have 2 data subjects for the same data. And well, what is the legal basis? Maybe the consent of A is enough, or maybe both of them, or maybe some other reason. But the situation becomes complicated when we cannot split the data D into 2 parts, say DA concerning A and DB concerning B. There will be some examples showing that such inseparable data do exist. And in this moment, when we go back to the basic principles of GDPR, so giving consent to process data by data subject, what should be the data consent in this case? So person A is enough, or person B is enough, or both of them must provide a consent to process the data. As long as the consent of A and B are the same, there is no problem. What happens if they have different views on processing data D? So let us consider the situation when A asks the provider to store D, and B asks to be forgotten, to remove D, erase D. So what is the right action on the side of the provider of data storage? So if data is erased according to the request of B, then we violate the right A of security of the data. One of the basic principles of GDPR is that the provider cannot delete the data at will, there must be consent for this operation, because erasing is also processing personal data. Okay, so this case creates problem. Another situation is that, well, we keep the data, A will be happy about this, but then the right to be forgotten of B is violated. Okay, then we can say consent of both of them is necessary to perform any processing. But in this case, the situation is even worse, because there is no such unique consent of both parties. So the rights to keep the data is violated, and the right to erase the data, well, is also violated. We are in a deadlock situation, and nothing can save us. Well, the solution would be, of course, to split the data into separate parts, data chunks. Each chunk corresponds to one data subject, and the original semantic is preserved. Well, of course, not that easy. A lot of artificial intelligence is needed to process the data in this way. Well, how to do it? So the first answer would be, well, let us take the silver bullet. Namely, we take pseudonymization, and then we create two parts, two data, DA and DB, which are corresponding to data subjects. Okay, so let us come to a promised example. The sentence, the notice in a medical database is that Alice suffers the same symptoms as her brother Bob. Okay, so a doctor may write something like this because immediately he can think about some genetic background or some environment problem, or some source in the childhood, and so on and so on. The same cultural background, so maybe nutrition, wrong nutrition, culture, and so on and so on. So we try to decompose this data into parts, the parts from Alice and Bob. And the first attempt is, well, we forget about Bob. We replace Bob by pseudonym X, and we have the sentence, Alice suffers the same symptoms as her brother X. Well, in this case, pseudonymization is a joke, because if she has only one brother, this person is identifiable, and this data is still concerning two data subjects. Okay, so her brother, Bob. So we skip brother, and we say Alice suffers the same symptoms as X. Well, it is a stupid sentence, because in the result, we learn that Alice is not the single person in the world that has these problems. Of course, the medical context is quite different. Okay, if we replace pseudonyms, both names by pseudonyms, then of course the record is useless from the medical point of view, because finally we have to provide medical help for Alice. The second example is implicit personal data processing. So assume that Alice and Bob publish some sentence that they earn together X euro. Okay, and then Alice is free to publish something different, namely that she earns Y euro in some cloud storage run by P2. So what to do then? P2 has to make a decision where to allow publishing this record or not. Well, the problem is that implicitly, this would mean publishing information that Bob earns X minus Y euro. And this is a personal information, of course, and maybe very sensitive. So what should P2 do? Perform some semantic analysis regarding violation of third parties? If so, then we have to define the scope of this analysis. And if there is some problem, faulty classification, what is the responsibility of the party running the cloud for this revealing personal data? Okay, so the next problem is classification of personal data. Personal data concerns identifiable person, and of course, the relatively easy case is positive case. If there are explicit identifiers, then of course the data is personal data. But what if the explicit identifier is missing? Okay, then of course negative proofs are quite hard because we have to show that it is impossible to derive, and we have to take some context. Okay, so taking a context is a problematic because maybe we take the data itself, the data set itself, but maybe then it will be a joke because splitting data into to separate databases would exclude any effect of GDPR. So the second option is all existing databases, data sets. But of course, it is problematic because we have to make the decision in real time, and we do not have time or even resources or the rights to inspect other databases and make some complicated analysis. So then information available to this data processor, so data, well, the party that is making the operation. But of course, it is a little bit complicated. But well, of course, it is seems to be the best solution. But even that, we create problems with time. Well, when we store data, we can do some analysis. Then the data is available in the web. Say, should we continuously monitor what is the status of this data? Maybe in the morning it is not identifiable person, but maybe with some additional context in the afternoon it is identifiable, and then it becomes to be personal data. So it is a problem. So the second problem is what are the consequences of processing non-personal data according to GDPR. So in principle, it's not covered by GDPR, but it is not really the truth. So we have here a simple example, some non-personal data set, and then transferring this data set abroad to the countries with no GDPR and comparable rules. And somebody there performs the anonymization of and publishes the personal data. Who is guilty for violating the rights and the freedoms of data subjects? So the party A not, because sending was concerning only non-personal data, so it is allowed according to GDPR. And the second party in the other country is not in the scope of GDPR, as long as no, it is not offering services or goods, which could be the case. A very important problem is data aggregation. So we get some data and then try to derive some conclusions about overall processes. Like in a bank, well, there are a lot of efforts to chase money laundering and so on. So we need some aggregation of data, but it's not the original purpose. So is the result of this aggregation personal data, even if there's nothing about identifiable persons there? What is the moment where this personal data lose the status of personal data? So the question is, do we have the right to anonymize the data, to create something that forgets identity of persons, but some information is left? What is the reality today about the GDPR? So the business is concentrating in compliance with GDPR just to have no problem with supervision authorities. So collect arguments about due diligence, not focusing on real security. In some cases, there is a risk, and there are voices that, for instance, artificial intelligence industry is blocked, or at least they have concerns about the legal status. There are, of course, supervising authorities, and there is some limited guidance how to implement it, and not these questions that I asked you are present there. There is also a threat of misusing power of these authorities for some particular economical or political advantage. There is also strict position of supervising authorities. One of the examples I mentioned here is banning information processing, where the result was fully non-personal and concerning illegal smuggling people to EU. And we are not focusing on the real problems like paparazzi disturbing personal rights. So protection level achieved, well, some people say that it's a paper tiger. It does not contribute a lot, but on the other hand, we have a lot of problems, costs, and also annoying the users with some questions over and over the same again. So on the side of research, holy grail. So GDPR is a holy grail, and the people start to think how to comply with GDPR, and almost nobody asks, does it make sense? So one exception is some publication of the Center of Data Innovation in Europe. So after 2 years experience, we have also a report from EU communication, 2 years of application of the GDPR published in June 2020. So report focus is that there are some problems with complementary regulation details that are different in different EU countries. There are problems with cooperation between supervisory authorities. They provide different opinions, different guidance. There are some detailed problems like small companies from outside Europe providing services here and having no representatives in the EU. Well, concerning the technology, report is quite optimistic and saying that designed to cover new technologies as they develop, and we think that there are severe problems with that, and it is not as flexible tool as you could expect. So the final report, the report section application to new technologies says that that it has proved importance and flexibility during COVID crisis. Well, it was really the case because it set some important barriers to some solutions proposed also in Europe. So the report finally says that talks about proven principles, and then mentions technologies like blockchain. And it seems that there is a lack of interest for rethinking the basic principles and facing the technological problems. Even worse, the next report will be in 4 years, 2024. So we have to live with these problems. Okay, so the approach we propose is that first we identify needs and we analyze what is doable from technical, economical, social point of view, then adjust the legal requirements and then adjust the systems. What is done in reality is something different, identify the needs, formulate the goals and corresponding legal rules as an idea, and then let the technician to solve the problem how to implement these rules. Then create supervision authorities to punish those who fail to create the solutions. It is not the way it could work. So we propose some small solutions in some areas like sharing personal data, how to solve the problem of two different parties of the same data, how to understand the contents that should be limited to the context of the data processor, what is the meaning of personal data. We propose that it is attribute of data and the processing party exclusively. So it could be different if the same data is processed by a different party. We have to take care about processing non-personal data. We have to understand data aggregation in a different way. So say that data processing is allowed as long as the output does not contain personal data. It will be free, the aggregation process and artificial intelligence. Okay, there are many problems that are not solved and not proposed, and we think that we need to focus on rethinking the general paradigms of GDPR and seek for improvements both on the technical and legal side to find some convergence of these two processes. Thank you very much for your attention.